It's 9:30 Eastern Time, the realest of time zones. That means it's time for the Devy Debate, brought to you by CampusToCan.com. Austin Nace is out. Chris Moxley and Matt Bruning are here, and I am Felix Sharp on a lifted version of tonight's show. Early flag plans for 2023, players who may enter the portal post-spring. But we start with a discussion about the coaching changes that are affecting our C2C and Devy teams. Now, last year, Josh Gaddis to Miami, predictably. I mean, we even talked about it on this show. Terrible jump from Rhett Lashlee to Josh Gaddis down there in Miami. He lasts one season. Virginia was one of the best offenses in the country in 2021. They add Tony Elliott as take him from Clemson's offensive coordinator to be their head coach, and he just totally neutralizes Brennan Armstrong. We've had a few of these moves last year that affected our C2C, our Devy teams. Robert Anae, speaking of Virginia going to Syracuse and lifting that offense, making it modern. Lance Leopold in Kansas. Zach Kitley, a big one there in Texas Tech. Want to have this conversation with someone who's paying really close attention to it, and that is Nate Marchese at CFF Nate on Twitter. He's a member of our college fantasy football team here at Campus to Canton. Nate, I think that we're always looking for a conjunction between talent and scheme. Some of the blue bloods, they have it. Bama, Texas, USC, they have both. Western Kentucky, they have scheme, maybe not the talent. Speaking from an NFL development perspective, Texas Tech has the scheme, doesn't necessarily have the talent. A place like Michigan probably has the talent, but doesn't have the scheme. Let's start here with Clemson. They have a new offensive coordinator. They have the talent. Are they going to have the scheme this year to maximize that talent?
Well, I think it's definitely a scheme upgrade from what they had last year. I know Brandon Streeter definitely had them going in the right direction from what we saw with Tony Elliott, because Tony Elliott was such a dumpster fire the year before and took that dumpster fire with him right on over to Virginia. But even still, even though they were trending in the right direction, Garrett Riley is still a big step up. I mean, that's the reason why, Dabo had to make that move. I mean, Garrett Riley is fantastic at making things easy on the offense, making things easy for the quarterback. He schemes wide receivers open with creative play calling. It's very similar to Lincoln Riley's offense. He does a good job of manipulating the defender's eyes, thinking a play's going one direction and it goes totally in a different direction. I think the question is, does he really have the wide receivers that fit what he wants to do? He's always had quite a bit of speed. If you look at what he had at SMU 2 years ago, if you look at what he had at TCU and all the speed they had, that's, I think, going to be the bigger question. Does he have the speed on the outside to make it work?
There's the Troy, Stellato or whatever. He's supposed to be one of the faster wide receivers on that depth chart. I don't think that that's a player that folks are talking about necessarily all the time. Would you just take a closer look at a field stretcher like that with Garrett Riley being the offensive coordinator?
I would be concerned that he's going to get enough playing time, enough snaps to be able to be that. I mean, I think that we have a pretty good idea of what some of the top of that wide receiver chart's looking like right now with Antonio Williams, Bo Collins, maybe Adam Randall. I don't know. He seems to be injured quite a bit. So, but yes, if we start to see some rumblings that he has found his way, into the starting lineup, then it would definitely have my interest.
Drake May is widely considered to be at the very least quarterback 2 in the 2024 class. For some, he may even be quarterback 1. I mean, this is a guy who had more rushing yards than Caleb Williams. Doesn't necessarily have the spectacular plays, but just a really good athlete and good all-around player. North Carolina, though, loses offensive coordinator Phil Longo, who has been at the head of some successful offenses. What are your feelings about what they've got there now at North Carolina?
As far as for the fantasy assets, I'm terrified. I'm terrified for the hire that North Carolina made. If you guys have listened at all from me, from Chasing the Natty or read any of some of the stuff that written about lately about Chip Lindsey. I think it's a real bad hire. I think this is this is going to be a great challenge of, like you brought up, scheme versus talent, because I do think the talent's there. I love Tez Walker. I think Drake May is a fantastic player. That running back room is loaded. It's a little messy, but it's loaded. It's got some really nice players. But man, I mean, Chip Lindsey has historically just downgraded every offense that he's come to, and then all the fantasy assets have gotten better after he left. So that worries me and what that means. The good thing is he does run the quarterback a fair amount. So from a CFF perspective, I mean, I think we still have at least a solid floor that we're working with Drake May and him still being a viable rushing option in that offense. But man, his wide receiver production historically is not very good.
Well, I too hate that hire, by the way.
Yeah.
Awful. I don't know what Mac Brown is necessarily thinking when he makes that hire, considering how bad his tenure went at Troy. He followed up on Neil Brown, right? Like there wasn't any gap there, and he was spectacularly bad. He also, I mean, how many times has he actually been a true play caller outside of Troy?
Right.
He was under Gus Malzahn for a long time. And like,
yeah. He's had Gus Malzahn. He's had Todd Monken. He's worked under some really bright minds, except for whenever he alone is the play caller. I believe he had 1 or 2 seasons at Arizona State where he was the lead play caller there. Those seasons were pretty bland from a fantasy perspective. Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't make sense because Mac Brown is a total CEO head coach. He will not interfere with anything that the offensive or defensive coordinator are doing. And right now, I think he's got 2 really bad coordinators, and that's a problem.
Yes, co-sign.
Did he lose a good coordinator to Wisconsin? I think it's natural to transition there, given that Phil Longo is going from North Carolina to Wisconsin. And it feels, one, did he lose a good offensive coordinator? 2, I mean, just speak to the fact that Phil Longo, it feels like, is building from scratch and bringing a totally different system, or we would assume bringing a totally different system to a Wisconsin team that's used to putting a fullback in the backfield and running their running back into the back of the line of scrimmage 30 times a game.
Yeah, if this coaching change or this coaching hire would have happened 15 years ago when the transfer portal didn't really exist, I would really, really be skeptical that he could turn over this roster in one season, because it is schematically a massive change to go from just ground and pound to his very up-tempo, high-flying offense where he's throwing it all over the field. I still have a little bit of doubts how well it's going to work in Madison in November when it's 30 degrees and 30-mile-an-hour wind. But this is a guy historically that is kind of the antithesis of Chip Lindsey, in that he's kind of built himself up and has a great history with quarterback production, has an incredible history with wide receivers. I mean, we've seen it with Josh Downs, with Brown, with a handful of other guys there. He did a very good job whenever he was at Ole Miss as well. So, and it's not like we're going to see Braylon Allen wasted here. This is a guy that has also produced big time running backs. I mean, what was it just a couple of years ago, whenever we saw North Carolina with Carter and who was the other one?
Javonte Williams.
Javonte Williams. Yeah, had both of them were top 20 running backs in the same season. So, I mean, this is a situation where we could see Braylon Allen continue to be a really, really fantasy relevant running back here.
Nate, I got to ask you the bottom line question with Wisconsin. This is a team that, traditionally speaking, we were not rostering any wide receivers from this team. Does that change in 2023?
I think it has to. I mean, this is like I said, this is a top 10 coaching. This is top 10 coach, offensive coordinator that has produced consistent wide receiver fantasy assets. Who that is right now, I don't know. I'm really interested now that they've kind of started spring practice. Ask me this question again in 2 weeks, and I might have at least a couple of names for you. But I think that there's talent in that room. I'm just not sure where those targets are going to want to go. Everybody thinks that it's probably going to be Williams, who transfers in from USC. I'm pretty skeptical on that. I think that they're probably going to go with a more proven guy. They got a transfer in from Oklahoma State that I think is decent, and then DK and Bell that are already there for Wisconsin, I think are potential strong candidates as well.
Well, I guess, Matt, we'll continue to pay attention to your spring practice reports to see how that wide receiver core is shaking out, because we could find some value there. Speaking of value, let's go down south a little bit. Jeff Brohm, the Brohm family is from Louisville. Jeff Brohm is back in his hometown. What does that mean for that offense? And, maybe a player like Chris Bell, who some have liked in this community, could we see a boom from him?
Yeah, Jeff Brohm, again, another, I would say, top 5 coach when it comes to producing wide receiver fantasy assets. I mean, Rondell Moore, Bell, he had a plethora of fantasy assets at the wide receiver.
And then Charlie Jones last year.
Charlie Jones, man.
Charlie Jones is not
Chuck
canon.
Sizzle.
Chuck Sizzle is canon.
Chuck Sizzle coming out of nowhere, man. But yeah, that's the deal, is that you want to invest, and you want to take your shots on this wide receiver room, whether it's Jamari Thrasher, whether it's Bell, whether it's I'm trying to think, who was the transfer they got in from Dion's group down there?
Kevin Coleman.
Yeah. So this is a wide receiver room that, again, similar to Wisconsin, you're going to want to listen in as much as you can on the spring practice reports, find out who's kind of taking the lead there. So I do like the makeup of what I've seen from some small tape on Bell. I think he's got the tools. He's got the size, 6'3", 200. He's very intriguing to me,
and has had success against Travis Hunter, at least in high school. Just going back to Jeff Brohm here for a second, it seems like he's had Rondell Moore was a slot wide receiver. David Bell played outside. I don't think that we can necessarily target any one. We're not targeting slot versus X versus Z with him. We may just need to collect one or two of the assets that we think are going to be starting there in Louisville.
Historically, he's actually pretty consistent with the outside receivers. Rondell Moore freakishly justifies some of the odds and what he did at his time at Purdue. But historically, Brohm will usually tend to feature the X and the Y a little bit more. Let's not forget, tight end wise, Brom's been really good too. Just because he runs that wide open spread offense, he's not somebody that neglects the tight end at all. He's got a strong track record there too.
Nate, I want to follow up real quick on that. I don't remember off the top of my head, but what I had seen from Georgia State last year, Jamari Thrash was a guy who played outside too. Mm-hmm. And he was super productive I don't think people realize how productive he was in the context of an offense that is, generally speaking, run first under Sean Elliott and the Panthers. Is he your preferred target here? Because I think he's mine, but I don't have a strong opinion.
Yeah, he probably had the quietest 1,000-yard receiving season I can remember, and nobody really talks about him. But I think from a CFF perspective, I think he's right now probably the one that I'm targeting the most, just because he does have that experience. They brought him in. He's hand chosen by that new staff. So he's probably the one that I'd be targeting right now. Value wise, maybe Bell's a little bit more of a value, because from a CFF perspective, you can get him for next to nothing. Whereas Thrash is going kind of more in that mid-round range.
All right, Nate, I'm going to see if I can get Matt engaged here. Let's talk about Coach Prime. Sean Lewis from Kent State goes to Colorado. There's going to be a lot of excitement around this Colorado team. Is it warranted? Like, is this a team that we should be targeting their skill position players for either CFF, Devy, C2C purposes, or are we still 1 or 2 years away from valuing this program?
If we're talking from a coaching perspective, this might be the biggest change of any program that we're seeing this entire offseason. To go from Mike Stanford, who I think is literally maybe the worst offensive coordinator that college football's seen the last couple of years. This is a guy that ran the ball 23 straight times when he was at Minnesota a couple years ago. To go from him to somebody that is a Baylor Art Briles disciple in Sean Lewis. I mean, it's like going from warm tea, boring ass warm tea, to like chugging Four Loko. It's going to be awesome, and I can't wait for it. It's going to be Sean Lewis he is not afraid. We're all fans of what Kent State did last year. He's not afraid to chuck it all over the field. He did it at Kent State. He did it at Syracuse. He did it at Bowling Green. He's gonna do it at Colorado because they're playing in the mountains, man, and he's gonna wear some people out when he's playing at that altitude. And it was sad what Mike Stanford did to that program.
So what wide receiver would you end up betting on? I mean, we just got the news today from Dion that Travis Hunter's been focusing mostly on wide receiver, something we've all talked about. Austin, representing him a little bit here, has said openly and privately that if he focuses just on wide receiver, I believe he'd be in his top 10 college wide receivers overall in his rankings. You've got, was it Mike Valerie's guys at Jordan? I always forget his last name. Is it Jordan Tyson, who had the really good year last year before getting injured? Which one would you be willing to bet on being the guy then if you had to draft one?
Yeah, it's really intriguing that he's focusing primarily on offense right now. I was kind of surprised by that when Dion brought him over. Me personally, I'm looking at Horn, the transfer from South Florida. He's probably the guy that I would take right now without knowing kind of how things are playing out in that wide receiver room. But with Hunter playing offense, what are you going to do? He's the number one player in the country coming out of high school a year ago. So that's something we got to pay attention to. But Horn's probably my guy right now.
And to your point, Dion did praise Jimmy Horn Jr. a ton, transferred in the first practice reports, praised him a ton for his hard work and how quickly he's picked up Sean Lewis's offense.
I like Tyson, but I think he tore his ACL like it was late October, early November, or something like that.
I think it was November.
Yeah, so that alone is a little bit of a concern just from a health standpoint. But
Jimmy Horn is Joe Horn's kid, right?
I think correct. So. I think that's right.
Yes,
yeah.
He is, yeah.
NFL bloodlines, just saying.
Nate, Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia all get new offensive play callers. Bobby Petrino at Texas A&M, Tommy Rees at Alabama, and Mike Bobo at Georgia. Rank these three coaching changes from best to worst.
From a CFF perspective?
Go ahead.
From fantasy, or are we talking just best hire?
However you want to do, however you want to do it. Just yeah.
Here's the deal. I don't think all three of them are going to have that big of a difference in what they've been doing recently. I went into researching Bobby Petrino because I'm writing the SEC coaching change article now, expecting to be blown away with all the differences that he's going to bring. And I was like, I'll be damned. If you take Lamar Jackson out of his track record, he's Jimbo Fisher. He's the exact same offense. So I guess it makes sense that Jimbo hired him. I think that can work. I will say I think Tommy Rees is probably the best fit for what they want to do there at Alabama. I think it's really bummer that they didn't get Ryan Grubbs from over at Washington. I think that would have been really fun if Nick Saban could have got him to run his offense. But if I had to rank the three, I don't know. They're all so lukewarm, really. I'll go Tommy Rees, Bobby Petrino, and then Bobo, I guess. I don't think much is going to – if anything's going to change at Georgia, nothing's going to change.
Hold him to it. Hold at CFF Nate on Twitter. Hold him to it if he gets it wrong. And I want to know in the chat, which one of these hires do you think is most impactful? Chip Lindsey at North Carolina, Robert Anai at NC State, Jeff Brom, Sean Lewis at Colorado, Petrino, Texas A&M, Rees at Alabama, Bobo at Georgia. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Nate, you mentioned, Art Briles and this veer and shoot scheme in college football. What are you seeing as far as Art Briles, who's long removed from college football, but it seems like his legacy lasts in his coaching tree and these coaches who are are running his system, carrying it on in the country?
Yeah, so his coaching strings has actually expanded more now that he's not in football than it did whenever he was back coaching. Obviously, Kendall Briles, who's the new offensive coordinator at TCU, formerly of Arkansas, and a bunch of others, is his son. But yeah, it's this veer and shoot offense. It is hyper speed. It is, I mean, we're talking 80 plus plays per game. They do these really wide splits with their wide receivers. So it puts DBs on an island. It forces them to have to really cover these wide receivers well. And they tend to recruit to the speed that they need to really run this offense. You see some really fast guys in this offense. There's a lot of volume for the quarterback. There's a lot of deep passes. So we tend to love it from a fantasy perspective because of the volume of plays that they run, because of how efficient it is, the amount of deep passes they have. Some of them tend to run the ball more than others. But, I mean, you just go down the list. Kendall Briles, Jeff Lebby, Dino Baber, Sean Lewis, Josh Heupel, Alex Golesh, who is the former assistant under Josh Heupel, and even Lane Kiffin's got a lot of these elements as well. These are all very, very friendly CFF producing, college production producing coaches here. And wherever they go, we want a piece of them for fantasy.
You can follow him at CFF Nate on Twitter, and you can find his work at campustocan.com. Nate, we appreciate you coming on with us tonight.
Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, Nate.
I think we got to give Nate a round of applause. I mean, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And
very nice.
That is very. Look, I told you we are upping the production value around here. But
just wait,
we actually have a studio audience now, I think, watching us.
We do. Yes.
These coaching systems, it really, really matters. I mean, what would DJ Uyunglele be in another system? What would Tyler Van Dyke be if he was still
behind Dr. Gilbreth?
Well, what would Tyler Van Dyke be if he still had Rhett Lashley and didn't have this 1 year of Josh Gaddis? I mean, that probably changed his NFL draft value. The fact that Mario Cristobal came in and made the wrong hire. So follow Nate Marchese at Campus to Can, his work there, and on Twitter. Listen, guys, I got good news and bad news. The good news is that the big break isn't coming for us here. That's the good news and the bad news. We need you, our audience, leave a rate and review, subscribe to the channel. Your rate and review can help us reach one more person. Your comment in the algorithm on one of these videos can help us reach one more person. We are building this thing from the ground up.
Dude, you sound like Sarah McLachlan.
I sound like Sarah McLachlan.
Your donation.
I wish I had that in the arms of an angel.
I mean, you can just sing it.
I had to say it.
You can just sing it, Matt.
I'm good. I'm not
being mocked and ridiculed here. We are trying to create our market. Nobody's going to do it for us, but you can help us do that. Any of the
27 cents a day.
You don't even have to be subscribed. You don't even have to be subscribed to the website. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Turn on your notification bell. Do that. Leave a 5-star rate and review on Apple Podcasts. I think we're at 94 rates and reviews on Apple Podcasts. We can get to 100 by next week. Do that for me. Help us get to 100 by next week. We're dropping content on TikTok, on YouTube, in the podcast feed every single day. And of course, March 1st released the freshman and supplemental draft guide and the Devy guide. The Devy guide is going to be coming here soon. So pay attention to that. We appreciate all of the support that you've given us from this point. All right. I want to get into post-spring.
Oh man, was that housekeeping?
Candidate. Yeah, why? Did you miss it?
Housekeeping.
What?
I was ready to play that. I didn't know we were skipping right to it. Great.
For those not watching live, Matthew has all these new tricks and toys with the new software that he's playing with. He's obviously not contributing by talking during the conversation with Nate. So
I thought I asked a great Travis Hunter question toys. Personally, but
all right.
Go ahead. Continue.
Let's get into post-spring transfer candidates. The transfer portal will open on May 1st, and we've seen some big names transfer after the spring period. Jamison Williams 2 years ago, Jordan Addison last year, Charlie Jones. I mean, these are some big names to transfer. Matt, we haven't heard from you. Can we start with you for some guys who you think could potentially be on the move after the spring games are over?
Yeah, I feel like there's not going to be as many this year as there was last year. I was kind of going through a lot of the teams trying to find ones that really stuck out to me. A lot of them are quarterbacks. So the first one is Evan Prater, who I still think, especially if he goes to like a G5, could be really good for that team. It really seems like Ben Bryant still has a hold on that job, even with the new coaching staff. I just don't.
Wait, Ben Bryant still has eligibility?
Yeah, this is the last year. Yeah, I know.
Oh my god!
So
wait, didn't they just have Emory Jones transfer there too?
They did, and he's apparently last report I looked at, like they said he was looking good as well. So like, I just feel like Evan Prater's getting pushed further down that depth chart. Like, if he wants any shot at doing anything in college, he's running out of eligibility. He's got to go if he's not going to be the guy this year. I don't know for sure about this one because I believe Kyle McCord's going to win the job. Does Devin Brown transfer out, though? I think is the big question, because if he does, I think we all believe he could start at, is it unfair to say, like 90% of colleges? Like, I think there's probably 8, 9, 10, probably a little bit more than that schools. Like, I think
115 schools. Is
that sounds good. 150 schools he'd go start at probably in fall, if he even transferring out in spring. He's that talented. But it seems like Ryan Day just finds a way to get these guys to buy in and sell them on like the Dwayne Haskins arc of like.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, that's exactly what it is. So either Devin Brown has to transfer if he loses the job, or become the biggest Kyle McCord fan that there is, like Heisman level, 44 touchdowns, solidifies his status as a first round top 15 draft pick, even though he's only had 1 year starting under his belt. And we see, I mean, Anthony Richardson, 1 year starting under his belt, he's going to be a top 10 draft pick. So we could see that from Kyle McCord, but that's got to be Devin Brown's plan. Either he knows he's not going to get the job, or he's going to transfer, or he loses the job and just hopes that Kyle McCord has this explosive season and he doesn't stick around for 2 years.
Well, I think that's got to be the big fear, though, for Devin Brown, too, right? It's like, if Kyle doesn't have that 50-plus passing touchdowns, like really great 4,000 passing yard season, if Ohio State loses a game or two, like, does Kyle McCord get that projected draft capital? And if not, I don't know that Devin Brown then comes in the next year and then beats him out. So that's why it's very intriguing to me what happens with those two, because I think, obviously, if Devin wins it, I think Kyle's gone. He's not staying. But if Kyle wins it, like, I think Devin Brown's really going to have to, and he's not going to have much time, because that window's only May 1st to May 15th, so he has to make that decision quick. And I guarantee you, Ryan Day's not giving us anything by April. I believe their spring game is on April 15th. He's not giving us anything on that day.
I know I'm throwing this out there, but let's say hypothetically Devin Brown entered the transfer portal. Do you have any thought? I mean, I can tell you, I would like to see him go to Wisconsin.
I don't know that. I'd like it. I don't know that he'd do that, though, with Tanner Mordecai just coming in there. Like, I feel like they brought Tanner Mordecai in. Oh, I agree with you. But I feel like if he were to go to Wisconsin, Mordecai would still be the starter. So there's a shot that Brown still sits for a year. And I don't know that he wants that. I'm trying.
What do you think about Louisville with Jeff Broughton?
I wouldn't hate that. Who went to Louisville? A quarterback went there with him, didn't he? Brady Allen didn't go.
Pierce Clarkson's
not starting year one, though.
No, Hudson Card.
Jack Plummer went with him.
Was it
Jack Plummer? Jack Plummer?
Oh, no,
yeah,
Plummer.
right.
Hudson Card.
Well, Plummer started with him at Purdue, and they got taken by Aiden O'Connell. And so Plummer's the guy, I think, this year. Unless like, what's his name? Brady Dorman beats him out.
I would love Devin Brown to come to Louisville.
You know where I would sneaky spot I'd love for him to go to? Arizona State with Kenny Dillingham.
I knew you were going to say that, too.
Go back west, somewhat close to
home.
Who would he
be throwing to?
Hey, I mean, it don't...
Royal Mary.
who looks healty. Hey,
Elijah Badger, the dude from Idaho State.
I trust in Dillingham with what he was able to do with Bo Nix. Devin Brown's got much more talent, and he's not afraid to use his legs. So a quick thing I'll tell you guys on that part. They ran a drill today for Ohio State, testing what quarterbacks would do in certain situations. And they ran a zero blitz. Kyle McCord stepped up in the pocket, threw the ball over the middle. Devin Brown said F it and bailed and had a 30-yard run. And then they compared it to what C.J. Stroud did, where C.J. Stroud had already diagnosed the blitz and told Marvin Harrison to run a certain route and then hit him wide open. And it was just interesting.
Which is exactly what you're supposed to do, by the way.
Right. 100%. But that's always been
Devin
Stroud's
Brown
thing,
made the wrong decision in that.
A 30-yard run in practice where you're not allowed to tackle the quarterback. Super impressive.
Right. Against the zero blitz, that's not going to happen in the game. He's going to get
so. But I think what he can do with his legs, and obviously we know the arm talent is there. Just with Kenny Dillingham, I could think you could see a Bo Nix type season out of Arizona State with him. It would be a lot of fun if he did. I obviously would love for him to stay at Ohio State, but he is one that I think could eventually go. So back to the rest of my list.
I still think Devin Brown to me is still one of the most exciting quarterbacks in college football, and I'm not going to let it go until we see him play. That dude is a baller, and I cannot wait to see him play. I'm sorry, Matthew.
I don't think any of us disagree with you. I don't know if he's retracted this statement, but I know for a fact that Austin Nace had Brown over Drew Allar last year. I don't know if he kept him there, but there were times that he argued Devin Brown was more talented than Drew Allar. So
I took him over Quinn Ewers. I took Devin Brown over Quinn Ewers.
So I would love to see him play too. I really don't think that it ends up happening this year. But keeping into the Big Ten quarterback battles, we have seen, or we've heard, that Mel Tucker is allowing this to be a actual quarterback competition. So he says, Jared Palmgren made a really interesting point. I don't think you come out and say that if you don't mean it when you have a fifth-year starting quarterback. That's not something you just come out and say, hey, it's going to be a QB competition. So I actually believe that Hauser has a chance to win this job. I was very high on him last year out of St. John Bosco. He can do a little bit of both. He can run and throw the ball. Now, I don't know that he'll be great in the Michigan State offense, but I do think if he wins that job, Thorne likely transfers out. I don't know if that means much, but this is his last year of eligibility. If Thorne wins it, I do think Hauser transfers out, and he's a guy that I could see kind of like what I talked about with Prater. Maybe he transfers down to a G5, and I think could be really good for you in fantasy if he goes that route. We'll see, because they still have Noah Kim there as well, who I imagine sticking around just as QB depth. I don't know that he's the guy who really starts anywhere. I think your guy, Andrew Paul, might be on the way out. With how loaded that room is, it looks like, unfortunately, due to that injury, he's kind of gotten pushed back on the depth chart. I find it hard to say there's a lot of RB rooms he couldn't go into if he's healthy and probably be the starter. So at this point, if you know you're going to be the third or maybe even fourth guy right now in Georgia's depth chart, why don't you? Go somewhere, do what you can do. It's not anything bad you leaving Georgia because of an injury. It's not like you got beat out. You were better than Branson Robinson, according to all the reports. But I find it hard, after what we saw from Branson toward the end of the season and even in that championship game, for Paul to now jump him. I feel like he's got to be even better than he was, and I think that's going to be hard to do coming off that injury. Garrett Nussmeier. Now, all the reports are that him and Jaden Daniels are going to get a 50-50 split. The coaching staff has come out and said it's harder and harder for them to keep Nuss off the field. But Brian Kelly just loves his vets, and I don't think that he starts Nussmeier over Daniels. I don't know that Nuss wants to stick around. Nuss has a shot to come out to the NFL draft this year. So he's a guy that I could see being one of those high-end guys that transfers in spring, ends up somewhere in fall, maybe ends up getting a starting job if we see an injury, unfortunately, in spring or something like that. And then the last one is your other guy, or used to be your other guy. You famously, as Austin loves to point out, although I think he does this more privately than publicly, took Brock Vandergriff 1-1 in a freshman draft. I don't think he's beaten out Beck.
Freshman mock draft, excuse me. That was in April of that year.
Draft,
so let's not even go there.
Regardless. I don't think he beats out Beck. I think Gunnar Stockton personally is the best of the three in that room. I know Jared has talked a lot about that he knows that there are teams that are going after and trying to get Brock Vandergriff.
He's a G5. He's transferring down.
But with his
he's
legs
end up at or South Alabama or something like that.
Oh, I was going to say Texas State. Brock Vandagriff feels like a real Texas State type.
But see, that's the thing. Like, that's the kind of guy that you would be intrigued with, right? If he
Malik
goes to
Hornsby
the
for a year,
G5, like that's the thing. Like, he's a guy you want to see go to the G5 for your fantasy teams. Which you're like, hell, now I could still get 3 years of him with the COVID year, and he could be possibly fantasy viable. I just don't think he's got a future at Georgia. So he's a guy that I think right now he's technically been the 2 there, but I would not be surprised if Stockton jumps him by the end of spring or summer, and he ends up transferring out.
There were rumors that Jackson must.
Two-time national champion Brock Vandagriff. Put some respect on his name.
There were some rumors that he was jumped by Jackson Muschamp, who was like
Jackson Muschamp got in the spring game before he did.
Yeah,
So-
I'm just saying. I actually had a few on my mind that you mentioned, Matt. I think Hauser's going to transfer. I think Thorne's going to win that job. I put my confidence level like 80%. I think Hauser would be an interesting transfer. I'm not sure that Nussmeier is going to lose that job. Like, I basically, okay, this was a couple months ago, probably 2 or 3 months ago, but I ranked Nussmeier over Jaden Daniels.
Apologies. We clarify the record. Setting the scene here for the podcast audience. For the record, Felix did not take him 1-1 in a freshman draft. He took him 108 in a startup mock. So just for clarification.
We don't need to clarify anything. And stop interrupting Chris. Chris had the floor.
That's really good, though. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. No, I just think Nussmeier can win that job. Like, I've ranked him ahead of Daniels at times this offseason. I'm not sure I would do that right now, but not out of the question. I got a couple, not as many. George Pettaway, the UNC running back. I think that room is just so crowded. Nate just talked about it earlier. Someone is going to move on from there. Kamaro Edmonds did the same thing last offseason just because it was really crowded. I think we're going to see the same thing with someone. My guess is it's going to be Pettaway. I don't necessarily know that it fits the scheme that they want to run as much. I felt like he was probably maybe more of a Phil Longa running back in like the Michael Carter role. I don't like Chip Lindsey, and Nate gave you a bunch of reasons why as well. I'm going to give you 3 quarterbacks from the 2021 draft class as well. All these dudes are transferring. Like, we're like a bunch of these names that we're giving you are these dudes who are going into their 3rd year, have not had opportunity to start, and now need to go somewhere else. Baron Morton. I really hope that he wins that job at Texas Tech. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Tyler Shuck is going to win it. He's got more experience. He performed really well last year. I just don't necessarily know what the path forward is for Baron Morton. And I think he's a really good quarterback. I just don't know where. I just don't see it. 2 obvious ones. I don't know why they haven't transferred yet. Ty Thompson at Oregon, who, dude, you're going to be like QB4 on your depth chart. Why are you staying if you're not in some like? I just don't understand why Ty Thompson's still enrolled at Oregon, to be honest. If he's really interested in football. It might not be. Like, he might, want to be there for other reasons. And then Miller Moss, who I actually to look this up today because I didn't think that he had transferred, but I wasn't sure. Because, like, this is the most obvious transfer candidate I've ever heard of. Like, Miller Moss at USC is behind Caleb Williams, will probably be behind Malika Nelson, and I think he could start at the I think all 3 of the quarterbacks I just named could easily start at the G5 level. They should all transfer. Is the bottom line. I don't know how many of them will. I really wish Baron Morton does because I think he's the most talented of this group. I think Alan True's been on the show and he's talked about Baron Morton too. Really, really liking him. I really hope he gets an opportunity because he's a good player.
Well, let's start with another Zach Kitley team, and that's wait, where was I going with that thought?
Texas Tech, Western Kentucky. Houston Baptist.
I think I was going with the fact that we've seen a quarterback transfer twice within 1 year with Jared Dagey at Western Kentucky last year. I mean, if you remember, Jared Dagey goes from West Virginia to Western Kentucky. Everybody thinks he's the starter. Late in the fall, Austin Reed is declared the starter, and Jared Dagey transfers again. Where does he end up? Troy. And then he actually started some games for Troy. So I think it's generally rare that that a quarterback is going to transfer after the spring because they still got to get the offense. But it can happen in certain circumstances where you don't anticipate the player being there. That's the case at UCLA. I don't think that they anticipated getting Dante
Jesus
Moore.
Christ.
That they anticipated getting Dante Moore.
Oh
so
my God. How long are y'all going to keep this charade up?
So you have Colin Schlee transfer from Kent State to UCLA expecting to be the starter. He's not guaranteed to get that job. I think we could see him enter the transfer portal come May 1st and try to get a starting job. I don't think that that's out of the question. Malik Murphy.
So Dante Moore's just going to win it straight up in spring after being on campus for like 2 months.
Colin Schlee's been on campus for 2 months. What are you talking? That's the whole point.
He also started a game at the collegiate level last year. He kept it close against Georgia.
Colin Schlee also been on campus there in LA for no more than 2 months. Same time as Dante Moore. Let me move on here. I'll just go.
I pretend I do not see it.
I will go through my quarterbacks. I think Malik Murphy has some great physical gifts. Malik Murphy went to Tom Brady's high school there in California. I think it's Gardenia. Is the backup to obviously Quinn Ewers, but he's also going to back up Arch Manning, or he probably will back up Arch Manning. This is a guy who can start, and I just don't see how he could be content to just back up 2 players for the balance of his career. And there's like little to no chance that he gets to start there. So Malik Murphy has a rocket for an arm. If he's healthy, I think he could start at a lot of places. Maybe not 115 like Devin Brown, but a lot of places. And he was a high 4-star or 5-star or low 5-star quarterback. I would like to see him transfer. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he understands that he's just going to play a support role there at the 40 acres. MJ Morris at NC State. You've got Brennan Armstrong there. I've heard MJ Morris described as one of the better or more physically gifted quarterbacks that they've had there at NC State. Let's remember that Russell Wilson was there. I would like to see him go somewhere else. Jadon Blue. Now, Matthew, I've been listening to the spring practice reports, and I understand that he's playing relatively well, but there are a lot of bodies there, and it's not clear that Jadon Blue is at the top. He's a good player. They got Cedric Baxter there, the freshman. I could see him transferring. Chris, you mentioned George Pettaway. I think that you have to add Omarion Hampton to that list. Basically, we're going to say that somebody from the North Carolina backfield is transferring. Some other names here: Kendall Milton at Georgia, an Alabama wide receiver who thinks that they're just going to be out. Maybe Isaiah Bond, maybe Malik Benson, is only there for a couple of months and then he transfers. Jaden Bray at Oklahoma State, Talon Shetron. I don't know what Lane Kiffin is doing at Ole Miss. They got Jackson Dart. They bring in Spencer Sanders. Somebody's got to go. Somebody's got to go there. And then, quite frankly, if a team has enough NIL money and can pull Luther Burden out of Missouri, that just seems like something you should do. As a matter of fact, somebody like USC, just go get Luther Burden. Let's just stop the nonsense.
Yeah,
I mean, he just signed some deal. He's got a chip on his shoulder with some sort of chip advertisement. I don't remember which brand it is now.
I understand.
There we go.
I understand, but I think it would make sense for him to go somewhere. So, all right, those are our post-spring transfer candidates. Are there any in the chat? If you guys have any post-spring transfer candidates that we did not name, let us know, and I'll read some of them here as we're going through our next segment and get. What
about Dante Moore when he loses the job to Colin Schlee year one?
I like how you said that. So Dante Moore is going to win the job after being on campus for a few months, when the same thing applies to Colin Schlee.
One has started a full season at the collegiate level. It has not. Period.
How about this? Dante Moore has started more games than Colin Schlee in the last 4 years. That's a fact. Okay. All right.
Okay. So has some random ass dude in like Division I of New Jersey football.
But they're not as talented as Dante Moore, though. There's a small difference.
There is a small difference. Nelly is in the chat. He mentions Ja'Cory Brown. Matt, you've mentioned
That's a good one.
Ja'Cory Brown is behind Emory. Is it Emory Williams, the freshman?
Yeah,
the freshman there at Miami.
They really seem to love Emory Williams. They've come in and said he already looks the part, already excelling in camp. So yeah, they seem to be big fans of him.
All right. Let's move on here. This flag plant segment, I do not take it lightly. Had some hits here. Anthony Richardson has been a flag plant. Troy O'Meary, JoJo Earl, but Tyler Van Dyke, even when he was like the third string behind De'Aaron King and Jake Garcia. Jake Garcia was the hot name. I really liked Tyler Van Dyke. So I do not take this segment lightly at all. And I'm usually trying to find a player who is undervalued, somebody who's going to be, it's been Zach Wilson, Ramondre Stevenson, Jamison Williams, the guys that I've kind of put my stamp on just off the top of my head. And so I don't take this lightly. I am not diving that deep tonight because it's still early and I'm going through my rankings and I'm trying to find the guys that I'm going to be planting my flag on. So I am just going to stick with Michael Penix Jr., who, for the record, I've been talking about him for the entire length of this show for the last 3 years when he was at Indiana, who had all the physical tools, just didn't have the consistency. And last year he added the consistency. He was healthy for all 12 games. And listen, I think if he is healthy for the entirety of the season again this year, if that happens, he just will be a Heisman Trophy candidate. He might be a Heisman Trophy finalist. And I don't care that he's a 6th-year player. I think that there's a chance that he is a first-round draft pick, a la Brandon Weeden. He is undoubtedly one of the 5 best quarterbacks playing college football. He can distribute the ball to any quadrant of the field that you want to. Make any throw. And yes, I know that he is a pocket passer, but he is very mobile in the pocket when he gets pressure. He had to at Indiana. I've got some clips where he's moving around in the pocket and getting punched in the face and still delivering the ball downfield. That's one of the reasons why I love Michael Penix Jr. is his ability to throw the ball while having chaos all around his legs, and arms. Listen, you guys are distracting me. With all this nonsense. But I really like Michael Penix Jr. And yes, he has the injury concerns with the knees. He's had, I think he's had 2 ACLs, so that could be a concern. But what has Hendon Hooker had? And people are like, oh, if Hendon Hooker was healthy, he'd be a first-round draft pick. He'd be the quarterback 4 ahead of Will Levis. It's not my words, Chris Moxley. You're sitting there over there rolling your eyes. I'm just saying.
Hooker's only had 1 injury, hasn't he? It's just the ACL.
The issue that I have with Michael Penix
Michael Penix Jr. better player than Hendon Hooker. Michael Penix Jr.
disagreeing that fact. I'm just saying, he's only had the 1 ACL, though. It's not like Hendon Hooker has this long list of injuries.
Flag plant. Been here, though. Been here.
I don't think that's you've been talking about him for a long time. You were talking about him when Kalen DeBoer was his offensive coordinator at Indiana. Then Kalen DeBoer becomes the head coach at Fresno State and head coach at now Washington, brings Michael Penix over. I think the injury history is just a little too much. This dude's legs are like chop meat that you would get in the supermarket. I just don't think he can. Did I cut out a little bit?
I can hear you.
Everybody did. Matthew.
I'm good. I can still hear him. I'm good.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
So I have one.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I only have one, and it is a player that we've talked about. Walker is a size-adjusted freak athlete. I think he's one of the better athletes in the country, period. And I think that he's going to be the wide receiver 1 for Drake May and UNC. And even though I don't like Chip Lindsey, he's just a really, really good player, I think, in his own right. He had a great game against Georgia last year. Like, I keep bringing up this Kent State game against Georgia, but like anytime you see a team like Kent State do things against Georgia, it matters. And so he had one. I believe it was just like a regular wide receiver screen that he took to the house, and he basically outran the Georgia defense. And I think Felix,
it was a straight up. It was a wide
yeah.
receiver screen. Yeah. Yeah, one of the best athletes on the field, no matter where he's playing, and he will be that again this year. Which is so. Devontae Walker could have been mine, but I mean, I don't know where we have him in our rankings. He's like at 13.
High.
So I'm like, that's not like the guy that I can plant the flag on, because I feel like we've been talking about him a lot. And by the way, we are having some technical difficulties because this is an organization with no money and we don't have the infrastructure. So bear with us as we get through those.
Matt,
yes,
I think Matt's, or it might be Austin's grandmother stopped running on the
well, I was going to say Matthew is actually pedaling underneath his table to keep the internet working, and he stopped pedaling, and that's why it stopped. So, and
according to the reports, I'm the only one not having issues. It's you two. I don't know what to tell you. Reports are Felix and Chris are freezing and cutting out. That's just reports I'm getting.
Okay.
Okay, where'd you get your news? Some partisan media?
Check your cell phone.
I saw it. No, I mean, I don't have anything to add to Devontae Walker. I just think he's a really good size-adjusted athlete who is going to have an opportunity to be the wide receiver one for the second best quarterback, top 5 pick in the 2023 draft. Or 2024 draft, sorry. Like, I just don't think it's that complicated. I don't know. Like, it's just a player I think we should be investing in.
All right, Matt, over under 3 minutes the next time we have a freeze up.
I don't know. Under. I guess over. You guys should get yourselves checked out. I don't know what to tell you. I'm doing good over here. Anyway.
Give us your flag plant. Yeah.
Am I only supposed to give you one? I've got 3.
Give us. We know that one is going to be Kyle McCord, one is going to be Quinn Ewers. So give us the 2 other ones.
Although we'll find out if Kyle McCord's actually going to be a hit this year. It's taken a little bit. Flag's been sitting on that hill for a while, but we're about to find out. No, one is Quinn Ewers, and I wish I would have had time to fire up the clip, because I had a clip of someone on this show claiming that he has no future after college football, and that's going to be proven wrong this year. I think he's going to go out and have an amazing season, likely end up being a first-round draft pick. My other one is Gavin Sawchuk, who I believe is going to end up being the best running back at Oklahoma this year. He's already up to 195. There was a lot of haters on him last year.
That's incredible, by the way.
I agree. A lot of haters.
Given when he came in.
On a very talented running back who's also a very good receiving back. I think he's going to have a great season with Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure his ADP is probably really bad because I've looked at the ranks and none of you have him ranked very highly. I'm all in on him. Yes, Quinn Ewers, next head coach of South Lake Carroll. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Anyways,
that's a future in football, by the way.
It is a future in football, so you would still be wrong. I still win. That's all that matters to me. The last one, I'm going to go a little bit against Chris here. I actually think Hauser is going to win the Michigan State job, so he is my other one. I think he beats out Peyton Thorne, or at least at this point plays this year and is better than him. And I still think that he's a very talented quarterback. Probably doesn't have much of a future there because I do believe in Sam Levitt as well. I believe he's a better quarterback, but I do think we're going to get a chance for Hauser to show off his skills this season.
All right. Those are the flag plants. We will have more flag plants and like deeper names as we get closer. It's March. What do you expect for us? Let's get Barnabas up here, Matt, while we're waiting. But let us know your flag plants on the season for 2023. I would really like to get some deeper names. As a matter of fact, if you want us to leave us a 5-star rate and review on Apple Podcasts with who your 2023 flag plan is, and if it's a good name, we'll read it here. All right, Barnabas. I
could have named some dude from the G5. I was being respectful to the name of the show, which is Devy Debate.
Well, I mean, you did talk about Hawaii all for about 5 minutes last week. So, all right, Barnabas. How did we do tonight, Barnabas?
So I think that there were a lot of opinions today, so there weren't so much I wanted to fact check here. But on the show sheet, you compared Michael Penix to one Brandon Weeden, which is actually an amazing comp because in both of their best college seasons, they had the exact same completions percentage at 72.4%. So granted,
Love it.
Whedon never tore an ACL in college, but that was an interesting because Whedon
Or
did
two.
make the record for being the oldest first round pick ever at 28 years old. So, Penix is getting up there in age too, so he's getting a little long in the tooth. But I wanted to do something a little bit more related to what you guys were talking about, which is I did a little bit of research behind the scenes while you guys were talking. I ranked each of the best offensive seasons for each of the coordinators / coaches you just talked about earlier with Nate. And so between, let me pull up the list, Art Briles, Mike Bobo, Tommy Rees, Bobby Petrino, Sean Lewis, Jeff Brom, Robert Anae, and Chip Lindsey. Let's start at number 8. Who has the worst? Do you guys want to guess, or do you want me to just read them off to you?
God, I need you to.
Can I just tell you? Can I just tell you it's Mike Bobo?
Is it Mike Bobo?
It is not Mike Bobo, actually.
What was the list again? I already forgot what the list was. Bobo.
Then it's got to be
Reno.
Chip Lindsey. Well,
Chip
maybe
Lindsey,
not.
Robert Anae, Jeff Brom, Sean Lewis, Bobby Petrino, Tommy Rees, Mike Bobo, and Art Briles I also included in there.
Briles, I think, had a good
I guess
one.
Bobo had his years at. I'm just so scarred from being a South Carolina fan with Mike Bobo.
So number
like-
8 is actually Tommy Rees.
That's not that
Tommy
surprising,
Rees.
really.
Makes
He had lowest total offensive yards per game at 448.5 yards. Anyone care to guess any of the best running back, wide receiver, or a quarterback on that offense?
Oh, his best
Or
quarterback
the year.
had to have been Drew Pine.
I was gonna say Ian Book.
It is,
Was
in
he-
fact,
was
Ian
he
Book
the
in
offensive
2020.
coordinator back then? I didn't realize
He
that.
was. And
Best running back had to be Kyron Williams then.
Kyron Williams. And anyone know the wide receiver there?
Oh.
It was
What's his name? Austin? No,
Kevin. No, it can't be Kevin Austin. No, he would have gone to the draft 2 years ago, and I have no idea. I can't think of the name. All I have is Michael Mayer in my head. I know it's not Mayer.
It
Chase
was one
Claypool?
Javon McKinley
Oh wow.
in 2020. Javon McKinley had the most yards that year. Number 7 was Mike Bobo, so that was a good guess. 467.7 yards. Year quarterback, running back, or wide receiver? Anyone?
His best? This including all of his offensive.
No, just that year. His best offensive production year.
Was he there for the Aaron Murray years at Georgia?
He was. In fact, it
remember
was
when he was
Aaron
there.
Murray in 2012. With his running back being Todd Gurley, obviously, and Tavares
course.
King was his leading receiver that year.
I would have never guessed that in a million years. Who the receiver was?
In 6th place is Chip Lindsey. We have his 2015 Southern Miss team, where the quarterback was this trio. By the way, the most NFL players. NFL
Nick Mullins.
starts. Yeah, was Nick Mullins a running back?
Yes.
Also an NFL player. Ito Smith with the leading receiver being Michael Thomas. Not that Michael Thomas, obviously.
The LA
Thank you.
Rams,
Michael
Michael
Thomas,
Thomas.
the one that has 366 career NFL yards, but the most players to have started an NFL game among the trios on this list. In the 5th place, we have Robert Anae with 515.9 yards. This was obviously his 2021 UVA season with Armstrong, Wicks, and anyone know who the leading rusher on that team was that year?
Wayne T.
Yep, Wayne Taulapapa. In 4th place, we have Jeff Brom with 534.6 yards. Any guesses on the trio or the year?
Can I give you the trio, even if I don't know the year?
Sure.
Aiden O'Connell, Xander Horvath, and Rondell Moore.
Incorrect.
Aiden O'Connell didn't pass to Rondell Moore.
Oh, I should have said Jack Plummer.
It is none of those three. It is his 2014
What?
Western Kentucky team with
Oh.
Brendan Doughty, Leon Allen, and Jared Dangerfield. In third place, we have Bobby Petrino with 544.9 yards. This was obviously his 2017 Lamar Jackson season.
Yeah. I would have guessed he'd have been first. Because
he
of
is
Lamar.
not. Well, okay, so here's the little bit of a cheat. We have Sean Lewis in second place because his best season was the 2020 COVID year where they only played 4 games. So so Dustin Crum, Marquez Cooper, and Isaiah McCoy.
I remember Isaiah McCoy, man. Those are the good old days.
We have one Art Briles. Anyone care to guess his quarterback in his best offensive year?
Bryce Petty is the quarterback, right?
It's got to be
Bryce Petty.
Josh Gordon.
No. Was Gordon there with Petty?
It was
Corey
the
Coleman?
Antoine Goodley years.
Oh.
Goodley,
I have no idea who the running back is.
I don't know how to pronounce that first name. It's Lake Seastrunk. I believe that was also the year that they played. There was like one of those crazy, like we had Houston and SMU last year. One of those defenses optional games. I think they were heavily padded by one of those games. But yeah, that is the list. Art Briles, best offense out of there. Sean Lewis actually drops to 6th place if you take out his 2020 COVID year because they only played 4 games. And Chip Lindsey is only 6th on that list, even if you include the 2020 COVID list. So maybe some. And I think the biggest takeaway here is that there is only one regular starter NFL quarterback on this list. There is no real fantasy asset wide receivers on this list. And Ito Smith is the most. Oh, Todd Gurley, I should say, actually, is the most touted running back on the list. But after that, it's Ito Smith and then Kyron Williams of 4.740 at the combine fame. So yeah,
at like 180
That's
pounds.
what I got for you.
Very, very well done. Very well researched, Barnabas. We appreciate it. All right, come back next week. Matthew will have your segment in the rundown in the menu rundown. All right, that's his fault. All right, make sure you support all of the content around the Campus to Canton family, the website, including the articles, the podcast feed, the YouTube page, and follow us on TikTok. Help us grow this format in college fantasy in general. But that's going to be our show for tonight. Apologies to Kirk Herbstreit. We ran out of time. We'll get him rescheduled soon. For Matt Bruni, Chris Moxley, and Barnabas Lee, I'm Felix Sharp. Good night and good luck.